Abdel Fattah el-Sisi rose from a low-level military officer to the leader of the most populous country in the Arab world. Sisi has been the president of Egypt since 2014 after overthrowing the nation's first democratically elected government. And in March, he extended his rule at least another 4 years after the country held an election that critics say was neither free nor fair. Hey guys, I'm Judah with NowThis World, and today we're looking back at Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's rise to power. Sisi was born in 1954 in Cairo, Egypt. He grew up in the Gamaliel neighborhood to a particularly affluent and religiously conservative family. His father, Said al-Sisi, was a shop owner in the local bazaar and was one of the neighborhood's wealthiest men, as well as the biggest employer in the area. Neighbors of the Sisi say that Said was a stern and intimidating figure who always dressed in a suit and tie, unlike most locals. This sternness had a particular effect on young Abdel Fattah. Old friends of the young Sisi said he was incredibly athletic. He would do sets of push-ups in between reading passages of a book and jump up and down stairs so he could build his calf muscles. He also became an extremely disciplined person. Friends even recall that Sisi would punish himself when he felt that he did wrong. Reportedly, he once even shaved his own head after getting in trouble for something his father deemed inappropriate. This drive and intensity laid the foundations for his goal of one day joining the military. Military service in Egypt is required for most men when they come of age. But for Sisi, he didn't want to just join because he had to. Sisi joined because he viewed the army as the best way for him to achieve greatness, something he had dreamed about for some time, literally. In one of his dreams, Sisi recalls telling Anwar Sadat, the former president of Egypt, that one day he'd be president too. In his 20s, Sisi dove into his studies and graduated from the Egyptian Military Academy in 1977, before serving in the infantry. Eventually, he went on to study at military academies in the United Kingdom and the United States. He specialized in military intelligence and began to rise through the ranks. He became a decorated military officer, serving as a military attaché in Saudi Arabia, and then the commander of Egypt's northern military zone under President Hosni Mubarak in 2008. In 2010, he was appointed to become the Director of National Intelligence, which essentially made him the nation's top spy. With this appointment, Sisi became the youngest serving member of an elite governing military body called SCAF, or the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces. Everything seemed to be moving along in his favor, but then in 2011, something would happen that would change the course of Egyptian history. It was January 2011 when a civilian uprising dubbed the Arab Spring swept through Egypt. Hundreds of thousands of people flooded into Cairo's Tahrir Square to protest against poverty, unemployment, corruption, and the 3-decade rule of autocratic leader Hosni Mubarak. It was an open secret in Egypt that Mubarak was grooming his younger son, Gamal, to become the nation's next leader. Because the move was unpopular among Egyptian citizens, Sisi knew the day would come when the military would have to part ways with Mubarak. But the Arab Spring made that day come sooner than he originally expected. On February 11th of that same year, the mass demonstrations culminated in the ousting of the longtime ruler, Mubarak. And when Mubarak stepped down, the military stepped in. The move would bring Sisi one step closer to his lifelong dream of being an influential leader. The military institution declared it would run Egypt's government only until an elected civilian government took shape. During this time, Sisi would continue to serve in his role as the nation's spy chief and member of SCAF, which now seemed poised to take control of the country, at least for the short term. SCAF chairman at the time, Hussein Tantawi, became the nation's de facto leader during this transition of power, and Sisi would position himself behind Tantawi as he prepared himself to one day lead the nation. But the elections that the military promised its citizens didn't turn out the way they had hoped. In early 2012, Egypt held parliamentary elections that elected the Muslim Brotherhood, an Islamist political party that had long been at odds with the military. The Brotherhood won a resounding 47% of seats in parliament. This election marked a monumental shift in Egyptian politics where, for the first time, power seemed to be transferring to the Islamists and away from the military. But this wouldn't last too long. In May 2012, Egyptians once again headed to the polls, this time to elect their new president. The frontrunner was Mohamed Morsi, a member of the Brotherhood. But when the Brotherhood's political victory all but seemed certain, the military intervened. 2 days before the final round of the presidential elections, the nation's Supreme Constitutional Court, made up of military-aligned judges, dissolved the Brotherhood-led parliament. The move made one thing clear: elections wouldn't end the long-standing divisions between the military and the Brotherhood, but rather put them on a direct path of confrontation. Morsi went on to win the election, and surprisingly, the military, including Sisi, appeared to accept the results and recognize him as the president-elect. But the struggle between these two groups was far from over. Sisi would soon find himself in the national spotlight. After Morsi took office, an attack in Egypt's Sinai region left 16 soldiers dead. Morsi used the attack to force the resignation of several military officials, including SCAF chairman Hussein Tantawi, and he replaced him with none other than Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. This was the moment Sisi had been waiting for so long. He finally made it to the very top of the military, becoming the new Minister of Defense and Commander-in-Chief. But after a year in those roles, Sisi's aspirations took on a new form: politics. Mohamed Morsi's presidency was by no means a success. He only achieved 10 out of the 64 campaign promises within the first 100 days of his presidency. And because of that, 1 year after Morsi assumed office, up to 500,000 people gathered in Tahrir Square, again. This time demanding the removal of Morsi from office and for early elections to take place. During this time, Sisi's popularity began to rise among anti-Morsi protesters, and they called for him to overthrow the Brotherhood's government. On July 1st, 2013, Sisi issued an ultimatum to Morsi. He told him to step down within 48 hours or face a military coup. But Morsi was defiant and refused to step down. On July 3rd, 2013, the military followed through on their threat. They arrested Morsi and suspended the nation's constitution. And just like that, Sisi had become the de facto leader of Egypt. Although some condemned the move as the end of a short-lived democracy in the country, Sisi claimed he was just executing the will of the people. But Morsi supporters disagreed. They took to the streets of Cairo to protest the military coup that ousted their president. Tens of thousands of his supporters formed encampments in Cairo, but Sisi wasn't going to be deterred. Under Sisi's leadership on August 14, 2013, Egyptian security forces stormed one of those encampments and killed at least 817 protesters. An investigation by Human Rights Watch concluded that security forces intentionally killed protesters, making it the worst politically motivated attack by a government since the 1989 Tiananmen Square killings in China. The human rights group said that the massacre was, quote, the worst mass killing in modern Egyptian history. But that didn't stop the military establishment from putting its full support behind Sisi, the man they wanted to become the next president. On March 24, 2014, Sisi took steps to make his leadership official. He resigned from the military and announced his candidacy for president. He was considered the only viable candidate in the election and won with over 96% of the vote that following May. Sisi had finally achieved his dream of becoming president. But now that Sisi has the power he's always wanted, the world will be watching to see how long he tries to hold on to it. So you just watched the story of how Abdel Fattah el-Sisi rose through the ranks in the military to eventually become the president of Egypt. But who are some other world leaders you'd like us to profile next and why? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching Now This World, and please don't forget to like and subscribe for more every week.